Now's the time to do the final step, which is the buttonholes and the buttons. Of course, we're going to put the buttonholes on first. And I want to talk just briefly about the size of buttons. Most dress shirts, if you're making a man's classic dress shirt or sports shirt, generally the buttons are no larger than a 1/2 inch, sometimes 3/8. But when you get up to 5/8, it starts to look more like a blouse. So be very cautious of the size of the button. And also remember that in men's shirting, the buttons are usually very placid. They're not the show part of the garment. So don't go for fancy buttons and things like that, because it just isn't going to look like the shirts you see in fine ready to wear. And that's the goal here, is a shirt that looks just like one that came off the rack at a high-end store, and one that we know is going to get worn often, because we're going to put our work into it. We want it to be used. So now to mark those buttons, we'll start with the collar stand. You want to come in, and this is in your pattern guide as well, but I never mark the buttonholes even if they are on the pattern tissue, because so many things change from the time that you cut the garment out till you get to that final step. So a 1/2 inch in from the collar stand, you'll make a vertical line. And then you'll make a line that is the distance of your buttonhole. So in this case, I want a 1/2 inch buttonhole. So this nice little ruler comes in handy for this kind of an area. So we're going to do a line at the end of the buttonhole that is parallel to the first line. And we're going to center that buttonhole on the placket. So find the center of the placket, and that's where the buttonhole is going to be placed horizontally, and then it's going to start a 1/2 inch in from the end of the placket. So that's where you want that, so that it is close to center front, because all the buttonholes should be on center front. So you remember when I talked about how stripes are our friend, and we can use the stripe for the center front? Well, that's exactly what I did here. So this dark blue line right here is the center front of my shirt. So if I didn't have that line, I was doing a solid or a print shirt, I would take a ruler and chalk a line the full length of the placket at exactly the center front, which is exactly the center of the placket. And just chalk that line the whole way. Don't stop and do little ones. Make it quick and easy for yourself. So then it's a matter of coming down 1.5 inches to start your first buttonhole and making that horizontal line, coming down the distance that you want your buttonhole. And in this case, it's a 1/2 inch. But you should have done your test first. Test your buttonhole first, make sure your button's going to fit through it nice. It's not too sloppy and it's not too tight. You want it fairly tight, because as it's used, the buttonhole will stretch out a little bit. So don't get it too sloppy. And then we'll make that 1/2 inch buttonhole. Then every buttonhole after that is measured at 3 inches from the bottom of the previous buttonhole. So from the bottom of this one, we mark down 3 inches, and then we'll just make another horizontal line at a 1/2, because our buttonhole is a 1/2, and then we'll come down another 3 inches for the next button, and so on, all the way down the placket to as far as you want to go. Don't ever go to the very end of the shirt, because no one buttons way down that close. So probably 1.5 inches to 2 inches from the bottom is where you'll stop. And you'll be the judge of that depending on the size of the shirt. So we'll mark all those buttonholes all the way down, and then we'll come to the cuff. And you'll center a vertical line in the placket. And then you'll take the measurement and come up here. Let's see, I think it's 2.5 inches, and it is 2.5 inches to where your buttonhole is going to be. So it's up here in the placket. And then on the cuff, we want to come in again 1/2 inch from the edge of the cuff, and then we want to center the button in the center of the cuff. And that's where you'll start your 1/2 inch button, and you'll come over. So we could just mark that 1/2 inch here. And this right here is where, let me extend this a little bit so you can see it. And that's where we'll put that buttonhole. Now I don't go into how to make the buttonholes because every sewing machine makes buttonholes differently. So we'd be here for hours and hours going through every different aspect. So you need to check your user's manual that came with your sewing machine and do some tests like I suggested. And make sure those tests are, again, on fabric that have the 2 different interfacings in them and 2 layers of the fabric. So you're getting the exact depth of fabric, the exact kind of surface that you're going to put your real buttonhole on. Another tip that I do often with buttonholes is I use a product called Fray Check. It's easily available in any chain fabric store, and it's just a little bottle of clear liquid that keeps threads from continuing to fray. So once you cut your buttonhole open, you may want to put a few dabs of that. I usually put it on the back of the buttonhole, and it's a really nice product, but there are some rare occasions where it might cause a dark spot. So test it on your fabric if you'd like to use the Fray Check. It's not imperative that you use it, but sometimes if the fabric does fray easily, it's really nice to have that because you are going to cut right in the middle of that buttonhole. And there are some fabulous tools on the market for cutting buttonholes, or you can use a very fine tipped sharp scissor again, like we have been using here. So just be careful not to cut any of the threads that are in the buttonhole, and don't go beyond the ends of the buttonhole. Now when you go to apply your buttons, I like to apply the buttons after I've already put the buttonhole in. And the reason for that is that you might be slightly off a centimeter here, a centimeter there, and it can make all the difference in your buttonholes lining up with your buttons and your placket staying even at the hem. So I do them one at a time, and don't sew the buttons as tight as you possibly can. You need a little give in that button so that it'll lay nice on top of this placket. If you sew them tight, it will pucker the placket and it won't look as nice. All right, you're just a couple of steps away from completing your shirt. So that's it for buttons and buttonholes.